Hello, we are here today with a guest joining us from Phoenix, Arizona, recently relocated to Phoenix in case there's a community there. And this is Rebecca. Welcome.
Hi,
Thank
Thank you so
Rebecca.
much.
So
Hey,
happy to have
Sarah,
you.
Louise, great to be here.
you. It's been a long time. You've been on the books for a long time, so thanks for your
Yeah,
patience. Yeah.
definitely.
How
Were
did you
you
come?
you
Yeah.
moved from Minneapolis? Is that where you were born?
No, I was actually born in Georgia in Fort
Mm,
Benning on an army base and
Mm.
was placed into foster care shortly after my birth, and was in the foster care system in Georgia for a number of months before being adopted by my family in Minnesota.
So you were
yeah,
actually born on the base, so somebody in the army?
Yeah, my birth parents are both military personnel. Got pregnant shortly after they joined the army and then gave birth to me on base.
not married. They weren't married.
No, no, they
No.
weren't.
How did you get up to Minnesota from there?
In the early 90s, there was a pipeline of children coming from the South to Minnesota through one of the foster agencies that was kind of representing families from Minnesota. So, actually, when I did come to Minnesota, I flew in with several other children from the foster care system
Oh,
with our social worker, and we were adopted by different families of the same church community in Minnesota.
I don't like how you use the word pipeline
Yeah.
because
How
it
old?
is like that.
I was actually still an infant. I was 3 months old.
Wow.
And your parent, was this a transracial adoption?
Yes, yep. So both my parents are white.
And were you the only child they adopted, or were there other children?
No, I actually have an older brother and a younger sister, both of whom are also adopted, and the three of us are adopted from different birth families.
Wow. Okay. And was it open?
No,
The,
it wasn't. It was closed, as were most adoptions in the 90s. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
I went through the process of searching for my birth family in my late 20s and was able to reconnect with them. And my siblings are still in the process of figuring out if that's, a good path for them in their journey.
Were your siblings also transracial?
Yes, both my siblings are Black like me.
Okay.
Okay.
Yep.
How was
Um,
that? How was that growing up? Like Minnesota and the whole.
Yeah. So that's a loaded question. It was
Yeah.
definitely it was interesting. So the Heritage Act was still enacted in the United States when me and my siblings were adopted, but in Minnesota, I believe it had been lifted, and that's why my parents were able to adopt children who weren't of the same race as them. But because the Heritage Act was still active in other states in the country, we did experience a lot of discrimination in our family from people in Minnesota who just had a lot of negative comments about seeing a transracial family out and about. So, a lot of stares, a lot of questions. I had people accuse my parents of kidnapping me when we were out in public.
Yeah.
It was a wild ride for sure. But
But you're,
definitely taught me a lot about just advocating for myself and for my family and being really protective of my peace.
how did you get along with your parents and your family? Was it a good, I mean, I use air quotes, good adoption and as good as it can be under the circumstances?
Yeah, so I think my parents would describe me as super independent, like didn't want to be raised, wanted to raise myself, and found it really difficult to sort of live under their instruction and authority. I don't know how much of that came from my adoption and just being fearful of parental figures, and how much of that was just a part of my personality and wanting to be more in control of my life.
Mhm.
Um, I would say adoption is traumatic inherently for many adoptees. And so while I have incredible parents who did an amazing job raising me and my siblings, there was also an element of trauma that was kind of underlying our family life. And me and my siblings exhibited that trauma in different ways
Yeah.
throughout adolescence and into adulthood.
Were your parents aware of this, like any kind of therapy, or should we do anything? And did they talk about it, or was it sort of just not brought to the forefront?
My parents were really open and always wanted us to feel like we could discuss our adoptions with them. We didn't do therapy just because I feel like that wasn't a thing in,
Mm-hmm.
in the early
Sure.
90s and into the
Right.
2000s. But they did always leave the door open for us to explore our adoption, connect with other adoptees in Minnesota. We were actually part of a group of the same families that adopted us and kind of worked with the same social agency. We were friends with all those families and connected with them several times a year. And so we did have a community in Minnesota of other transracial adoptive families, which was really helpful in terms of just
Yeah.
feeling like we had people like us in our
Yeah.
proximity.
Did they,
But
oh,
oh,
I'm
go ahead.
sorry.
No,
I
I was
just wanted to
gonna,
know if they put you in schools that with other people, Black people, so that
oh,
you
that's a
were,
great question. Yeah, so we grew up in a neighborhood called the Midway, and it's in St. Paul, Minnesota. And that was super diverse. Lots of Black people, lots of Hispanics. It was good to be raised in an environment where diversity was kind of at the
Good.
forefront of my parents' mind. And the schools we went to were also very diverse. We switched between private and public throughout elementary and into middle and high school. And I never felt like an odd one out. I was always surrounded by people that looked like me.
I'm so glad to hear that. We're reading Angela Tucker's book right now, and
Yeah,
it's so important, right? Like
yeah,
for
definitely.
anyone listening or just some of the stories in
we'll
there
make
just
sure to
floor
air
us.
your episode while we're still reading this.
Yeah, we'll make sure to air
Yeah.
it so it
Because
ties
we have
in.
3 weeks
Yeah,
left.
Angela Tucker is a good friend of mine, and I actually
Oh, she is.
served on the board of directors at Adoptee Mentoring Society where
Oh,
she works. So I'm glad you are reading that book.
yeah, we'll
Hmm.
definitely air it then. And Adam was on that, Adam, the
Yes, yeah.
Esperanza. Yeah.
Hmm.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
She's
So,
wonderful.
so growing up, I mean, did you and your siblings gel, or what, did you just feel, I mean, you were independent and wanted to raise yourself. Did you feel just kind of alone in a way in your family?
Yeah, so I was very different than my siblings. Kind of as the middle child, I always felt like not a sense of neglect, but just that I was in my own little world and kind of dealing with my trauma and my emotions on my own. I was also very closeted, so I never wanted to talk about my adoption. My parents would ask me frequently if I was open to exploring that with them, and I always said no.
Mm,
Whereas my younger sister was very open and wanted to understand where she came from, who her birth family was, why she was adopted. My older brother was kind of a mix between the two of us, where he was open to talking about it, but he didn't have as strong as a need to learn about his history as my younger sister. So the three of us were very different in our approach to our adoptions. And again, I think it's just because we navigated our trauma and our journeys differently.
it's interesting how you're the one doing all the stuff now, right?
Yeah, yep. I find a lot of healing in it. And
Mm-hmm.
actually, through my friendship with Angela Tucker and the work we did at Adoptee Mentoring Society, I see the value in it and the way in which it can empower adoptees to talk
Mm-hmm.
about their story and be in community with one another.
That's
Did
great.
your Were you adopted because your parents had fertility issues?
Oh, but my parents, not my birth parents.
Your raising parents.
Yeah, my parents did, yeah, had fertility issues, and they had wanted to adopt anyway. They wanted to have biological children and adoptees in their family, but when they found out that they couldn't have bio kids, that's when they focused solely on adoption.
Where were they drawn to that? Where did that come from? I'm just curious.
Yeah, I think they felt a moral and social responsibility to care for people who were marginalized and didn't have advocates. I think that my mom, especially, has always been really passionate about children and felt like motherhood is her calling and her purpose. And so she didn't care where her children came from, but she felt like both my parents felt like it was it was their responsibility and their duty to care for children in the system.
Mm-hmm.
Was this a
Yeah.
religious thing?
Yeah, we were raised Christian. My parents are Christian, and so that definitely was infused into their approach to life. But I think even if we weren't raised in a religious environment, my parents are both very caring, empathetic individuals who definitely feel like it is their responsibility to be active participants in humanity and serve other people.
I just like the fact that they
Mhm.
knew that you should be in, different cultures and with different
Yeah.
people. I mean, they had
Mhm.
some awareness of this, which isn't
Yeah.
always the case, as we know,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
And so and how did you end up searching? Like, I'm curious about your bio parents.
Yeah, so without sharing too much about them to respect their privacy, when I was in my mid to late 20s, I was going through a lot of health problems and just really concerned about my future and my ability to have biological children. And I remember my OBGYN at the time, who ended up being just a very influential figure in my life, recommended that I search for my birth parents as I was beginning to think about my future and just to help me understand my health history and maybe what I inherited. And he had actually helped deliver many babies who were placed for adoption, and also helped many women look for those babies when they were older, and reconnect mothers with their biological children post adoption. So he was the catalyst for me to begin my search and was really supportive throughout my journey to find my birth family.
You don't hear that often. You know what
No,
I mean?
it was unreal to have.
Helping place them, then helping them
Yeah.
find them.
Yeah, he was an amazing man.
And the OBGYN is your entrance is just an interesting because you were
Yeah.
kind of, you said, closeted, fogged
Yeah.
about it. Uh-huh.
And then the reason that he first kind of approached me on this subject was because I went to an appointment and brought my mom with me, and he was curious why this white woman was coming with a black woman to an appointment, and
Oh,
he had just helped facilitate many, many surgeries in my life at that time. And so as family members would visit me at the hospital, he was curious why none of them really looked like me. And that's when we got started having conversations around adoption and my story. And he took a huge interest in just making sure I felt like a whole person. And he noticed that part of my kind of fractured identity was potentially coming from my adoption, and wanted to encourage me to work on mending that void.
wow.
What had your raising parents told you about your biological parents?
They had told me that they were both in the military, that they were really young when they got pregnant with me, and that they did not feel they had the skills or capacity to raise me.
Mm.
Um, we were given actual transcripts from some interviews that my birth parents did with the social services agency that they placed me through. So I did have papers with information about them and some background into why they placed me, which was really fascinating to see and to read.
Yeah.
And so in your mid-20s, you start your search.
Hmm.
Um, the doctor helped you.
Yeah. Hmm.
And how did that go?
It was really interesting. So I searched for about a year and could not find like any information on them. And then my mom actually, I think this was in late 2019, ran a
Hmm.
background check on my birth mom and was able to identify her. And then I reached out via email, and we started conversing and talking about, why I reached out, what kind of information I was interested in learning about, and giving my birth family a chance to share their story as well.
So you didn't, this was 2019 I didn't realize that was so recent.
Yeah.
Did you not do any DNA? You didn't, decided not to do that route?
I did do Ancestry,
Mhm.
the DNA. I did use that DNA tool, but I shut off the familial match results in the app because I really just wanted to understand my heritage without connecting with other relatives on the application. So I don't know why I chose to do it that way, but I think as someone who's pretty private, I didn't want to open up the door to meeting a bunch of strangers right away because I felt like it would be very overwhelming. And I didn't know if my birth family had shared with their community that I existed. And so I
Mm.
didn't want this DNA app to trigger any kind of unexpected trauma in their life with the people that they know and love.
Like me, I'm sitting there in a family that's like, who the hell is this? That's
Yeah,
still the
yeah,
case.
yeah.
Yeah. So when you reached out to her, so was this via like messenger or email? How
This
was
was
she?
email.
Was she blown away?
Yeah, she was blown away. I don't know if she ever felt like I was going to contact her.
Mhm.
And she wanted to make sure that I was who I said I was. So there was somewhat of a vetting process at first to really make sure that I was Rebeccah Carlson and I was the baby that she had placed for adoption in 1992. But after the vetting process and just walking through different facts and details of my life to confirm my identity, then she was really open to sharing her story and conversing with me as to why I was placed.
Was she sad? You were her first, I'm assuming. Did she have other children?
Yeah, she and my birth father stayed together and had two
Oh,
other children. Yeah, I know that's very uncommon.
Wow.
Yeah, so they stayed together and had two other children.
How did that
Um,
feel?
it is strange to me in a sense because we're all very close in age, the three of us. And so it made me wonder why they placed me and then had other children shortly after and kept them.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't like to go down that rabbit hole too often because it just births so many.
I'm
yeah.
sorry for
No,
asking.
no, no,
I
not at
know that
all. Not at
must be
all.
painful. I know it
Yeah,
must be
no,
painful.
it births a lot of complex emotions.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the day, they
I
are
had a similar situation. So,
okay.
not
Yeah,
my birth parents together, but two, one born not long after me and
Yeah.
kept.
yeah,
Right.
yeah. So it's interesting when you think about someone being a free agent and making choices that impact you so deeply. But
Yeah.
at the end of the day, I think that's how I've objectively tried to look at it. They were really young. They made different choices than I might have made in that situation. But I'm still blessed in that I have two wonderful parents and two siblings and a life in Minnesota that was and is meaningful to me with lots of people I care about. So I think for me, it's important to look at what I did get out of the adoption, um, and maybe the ways in which I have still been blessed throughout all of it.
Yeah. And you have two full siblings
Yeah,
also, which is just like, wow, they're full siblings.
yeah,
That's not always the
mhm,
case. How
yeah.
have you met them or
Yeah,
talked
I
to them?
met both of them
Oh.
through the reunion, all via email,
Mhm.
which was nice to have kind of written documentation to refer back to over time. And it was great to be able to hear their stories as well and just how they've approached the adoption
Mhm.
as they've aged and tried to understand, who I was and where I was. There was a lot of curiosity on their part since it was a closed adoption. They didn't have any details about who I was. They just knew that they had this third sibling
Oh,
out
they
in,
were told.
yeah, they were told.
Oh, okay. That's
Mhm.
good.
Yeah, definitely. So,
Big.
It kind of a gentler reunion, not just shocking
yeah.
somebody at 20 years old. Hey, here's
Yeah.
this long lost sister.
Yeah. Yeah. So they were aware that I existed and who I was. And I think it was good for us all to be able to meet and at least virtually through email and talk through how the
Yeah.
adoption impacted all of us.
And
So you've
you're
not met in person yet?
No, not yet. That's a choice that I made because I felt like I wasn't ready to pursue that part of the reunion. And I know my birth family definitely wished that I had been open to meeting them in person, but for whatever reason, that's just not what I want at this point in time. And so I have to honor that.
you're not there yet.
Hmm.
I mean,
Yeah.
we get that. It takes
Hmm.
time, these things.
Yeah.
What it's interesting to me that your parents went through quite a I'm assuming, I'm just we can all assume they went through a bit of trauma to give you away
Mhm.
while they're young
Yeah.
in the military, probably in training, whatever they're going through. It's shocking they stayed together.
Yeah, I think that's very uncommon, but
Yeah.
throughout our reunion, one thing became very clear to me, which is that my birth parents love each other very much and are very bonded to each other, which was really beautiful to see that my
Mm-hmm.
birth father would support my birth mother through an adoption and want to be there for her and continue building a life with her.
Yeah.
So I'm happy for them that they were able to stay together, and it's been amazing to see that they've gone on to have successful military careers, that
Mm-hmm.
they have built a family together, and that they're happy.
I bet they missed you. I mean, it's weird because I know you're close to your family growing up, but they missed you, I'm sure. It
Yeah,
must be hard, you know.
yeah.
And
I'm
there
sure they
might
do
come a
want to
time,
meet you. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, there
Mhm.
might come a time when you want to meet them. You never know.
Yeah,
Life is long,
yeah.
you
It
know.
is long, yeah, and there are many chapters to life, so
Hmm.
we shall see.
Yeah.
It really is long. Like I feel just old now, right? But it's like I still every day I feel like a kid, like, oh my gosh,
Mhm.
this and this, these mind-blowing things, right? So that's the process, a lot of people when they listen, I think probably go, why didn't they do this or that? Until you're in it, it's
Yeah,
a lot to balance,
yeah.
right?
And the
Hmm.
healing is a long
Hmm.
road,
Yeah.
if even possible.
Hmm.
I still don't know if that
Yeah,
wound is able to be healed. I think
yeah,
we can live with it, work with it, make it a little bit better, but
yeah,
at least for me, I don't know that it'll ever be fully
yeah.
healed.
I
Uh,
definitely agree with that. It can feel like a very vast ocean at
mhm.
times, and sometimes I feel like all I have bandwidth for is just a droplet of
Same.
exploration into that
Yeah.
part of my life. So, I obviously care for my birth family and want the best for them,
Hmm.
but it's a weird dichotomy because I also really care about myself and protecting myself as well. And so like we said, time will tell and life is long. And so I'm definitely open to exploring in-person reunion with them someday.
I like that you're
You have
saying,
to take care of yourself
yeah,
Yeah.
that's,
first.
Mhm.
I like
And
that too.
Yeah.
and to, that's a pretty big it's a pretty big thing to realize, to have realized,
Yeah.
oh, wow, they stayed
Yeah.
together. They had kids
Mhm.
shortly after me. I
Mhm.
mean, and it's not that much, it hasn't been that many years.
Yeah.
That feels like an extra layer of
It
pain,
does.
Yeah.
that,
Hmm.
so I
Yeah.
understand
And I
Yeah.
taking
like I,
yourself.
I like taking care of yourself too because I think a lot of adoptees when I'm listening to you, you're younger than us. I was gonna say
Mhm.
you're much younger than us, but you have the agency to know that, right? Like I
Mhm.
think so many people throughout this journey, especially maybe in our area, they don't take care of themselves. They're balancing
Yeah.
pleasing, pleasing, pleasing on
Mhm.
both sides and how do we do this? And you have to be okay, right?
Yeah.
Before anybody
Mhm.
else can be okay. And I
Mhm.
like hearing that for you that,
Yeah.
and just finding that you're in Angela's group and have helped with that
Mhm.
because she's doing great work there with that.
Yeah, it was really fun serving on the board of directors. I started off as vice chair before moving into the chair of the board, and it's been cool to work in a nonprofit startup and just be able to support so many adoptees and support Angela as she scales and grows the programming. So that was a huge honor, and I'm just so excited to see what she does next and where Adoptee
Yeah.
Mentoring Society goes in the future.
Well,
Well,
thanks for your hard work and
yeah.
thanks for coming on and telling your story. I know that isn't easy. It isn't easy
Mm.
for me either. So I really appreciate it and your
Yeah.
candid and
Absolutely.
openness and honesty.
Hmm.
Really,
Yeah.
really loved having you.
Yeah, this has been amazing. Thank you so much. And I think these kind of conversations are so refreshing and healing for me. So I just appreciate the time and the opportunity to share a little bit about myself.
Oh, stay in touch with us. Like if things
Yeah.
change, just, not publicly, we don't, but just tell us. And,
Okay.
I'm curious
Yeah,
how your journey goes.
I'd
Yeah.
love
And
to
if
hear
you're
the
ever in
follow-ups.
Phoenix, yeah, if you're ever in Phoenix, let me know.
I do come to Phoenix and I will let you know because
Yeah.
it's very dry it's very like bank world when I go.
Yeah.
It would be nice to see an adoptee and have a coffee or
Yeah.
something.
I would love
A
that.
friend. I feel like when we
Yes.
meet, we're all friends, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I love it. Well, thank you. Thank you for coming on.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Rebecca. So nice to meet you.
You as well. Take care.
Take care.
Bye.